Marcus Chen had always believed that luck was something other people had. After losing his left leg to an improvised explosive device in Afghanistan, watching his marriage crumble under the weight of his nightmares, and struggling to find work that didn't make him feel like a charity case, he figured the universe had used up all his good fortune before he was born. The prosthetic leg was a constant reminder that some things could never be fixed, no matter how much physical therapy or positive thinking you threw at them. The job at the Deep Space Mining Station orbiting Kepler 442b wasn't exactly a dream career, but it paid well enough to cover his small apartment on Earth and the medications that kept the phantom pain at bay. The work was simple: monitor the automated mining drones, run diagnostics on the extraction equipment, and make sure nothing exploded while the real engineers were sleeping. It was the kind of job they gave to people who needed work but didn't have the credentials for anything better. Marcus had been on Station Omega-7 for 8 months when everything went sideways. The distress beacon appeared on his console at 0347 hours ship time. He'd been nursing his third cup of coffee and watching the mining drones tear chunks of rare minerals from the planet's surface when the proximity alarm started screaming. The signal was coming from the asteroid field on the far side of the system. According to the computer, it was a Ziltharian vessel, though Marcus had never heard of that species before. The database showed they were members of the Galactic Council, which meant helping them wasn't just the right thing to do. It was legally required under the Terran Council Mutual Aid Agreement. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and headed for the maintenance shuttle. He'd piloted similar craft during his military service, and muscle memory took over as he ran through the pre-flight checklist. The shuttle wasn't built for speed, but it was reliable, and that mattered more when you were heading into an asteroid field to rescue aliens you'd never met. The journey took 47 minutes. Marcus spent most of it wondering what he'd find when he reached the distress signal. Pirates were always a possibility out here, though they usually targeted cargo haulers rather than mining operations. More likely it was just mechanical failure. Space was hostile enough without adding malicious intent to the equation. The Ziltharian ship was wedged between 2 massive asteroids, its hull breached in at least 3 places. Atmosphere was venting from the wounds like blood from a dying animal. Marcus maneuvered the shuttle closer, looking for signs of life. The ship's design was unlike anything he'd seen before, all flowing curves and organic angles that made it look more grown than built. His comm system crackled to life with an alien voice, speaking in heavily accented English. "Human vessel, this is Captain HFY of the science vessel Stardancer. We have suffered catastrophic damage and require immediate assistance." "This is Marcus Chen from Station Omega-7, he replied. "What's your situation?" "Our crew of 7 is trapped in the forward section. Our life support will fail within the hour. We cannot reach the escape pods due to structural damage." Marcus studied the wreckage through his view screen. The ship's forward section was still intact, but getting to it would require navigating through a maze of twisted metal and exposed conduits. His shuttle wasn't designed for that kind of precision work. "I'm going to have to EVA, he told the captain. "Prep your people for emergency transport." He'd done plenty of spacewalks during his military service, but those had been routine maintenance jobs on well-mapped vessels. This was different. This was flying by the seat of his pants with lives on the line, the kind of situation that could go wrong in 100 different ways. The EVA suit felt familiar, despite the months since he'd last worn one. Marcus checked his air supply, thruster fuel, and emergency beacon before cycling through the airlock. The silence of space enveloped him like a heavy blanket, broken only by the sound of his own breathing and the distant hum of his suit's life support systems. The Ziltharian ship loomed ahead, its alien architecture even more unsettling up close. Marcus activated his magnetic boots and began making his way along the hull, following the path of least damage toward the forward section. Twice he had to detour around areas where the metal was too twisted or where exposed power conduits posed an electrocution risk. The entrance to the forward section had been sealed by an emergency blast door. Marcus located the manual override and began the laborious process of cranking it open by hand. The mechanism was designed for Ziltharian physiology, and what should have taken minutes stretched into a quarter hour of struggle. When the door finally opened, Marcus found himself face to face with 7 of the strangest beings he'd ever encountered. The Ziltharians were tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to reflect the starlight. Their captain, HFY, stepped forward and extended a hand in what Marcus assumed was their equivalent of a handshake. "We are grateful for your assistance, human Marcus Chen," HFY said. "Few would risk their lives for strangers." "Not really strangers if we're all stuck out here together," Marcus replied. He was already calculating how many trips it would take to ferry all 7 aliens back to his shuttle. The math wasn't encouraging. That's when he noticed the 8th figure huddled in the corner. Unlike the others, this one was much smaller and covered in what looked like pale, almost white scales. At first, Marcus thought it might be a child, but as he got closer, he realized it wasn't Ziltharian at all. "What about her?" he asked, nodding toward the small figure. HFY's expression darkened. "She is cargo, a specimen we were transporting to the research facility at Beta Centauri. She is not a priority." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Cargo? A dragon hybrid from the Andromeda system. Quite rare. The scientists were eager to study her unique physiology." The small figure looked up at Marcus, with eyes that were unmistakably intelligent and filled with fear. She couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall, with white scales that seemed to shimmer in the emergency lighting and delicate wings folded against her back. Everything about her posture screamed terrified child, regardless of her species. "She's sentient," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "Technically, yes, but she has no legal standing under council law. Her people are not members of the Galactic Council." Marcus had heard enough. He'd seen too many people treated as less than human during his time in the military, had watched politicians justify horrible things by claiming their victims didn't count as real people. He wasn't going to let it happen again, not while he could do something about it. "She comes with us," he said. "That is not necessary. We can arrange for her transport later." "No." Marcus's voice carried the authority of someone who'd given orders under fire. "She comes with us or nobody comes with us." HFY started to protest, but Marcus was already moving toward the small dragon. Up close, he could see that her wrists bore the marks of restraints, and her white scales were dulled with neglect. She flinched when he approached but didn't try to run. "Hey there," he said softly. "I'm Marcus. I'm here to get you out of this mess." She tilted her head, studying him with those large, dark eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You would help me, even though I am not your kind?" "Especially because you're not my kind," Marcus replied. "That's what makes it the right thing to do." The evacuation took 3 trips. Marcus ferried the Ziltharians to his shuttle first, despite HFY's continued protests about leaving the dragon behind. On his final trip, he found her exactly where he'd left her, apparently convinced that he would abandon her like everyone else had. "Told you I'd be back," he said, extending his hand. She stared at it for a long moment before taking it in her own, much smaller one. Her scales felt warm despite their pale color, and Marcus could feel her trembling. The journey back to Station Omega-7 was tense. The Ziltharians were grateful for the rescue, but clearly unhappy about Marcus's insistence on saving what they considered valuable research material. Marcus ignored their complaints and focused on keeping everyone alive long enough to reach safety. The dragon, who had introduced herself as Luna, spent the trip pressed against the shuttle's observation window, staring out at the stars with an expression of wonder mixed with fear. Marcus found himself watching her more than he probably should have, struck by how young she seemed despite her obvious intelligence. "Where will you go now?" he asked during the final approach to the station. Luna's expression fell. I do not know. The scientists paid much money for me. They will not simply let me go. Marcus had been thinking about that problem since the moment he'd decided to rescue her. The legal situation was complicated. Technically, she was still property under Galactic Council law, which meant the Ziltharians could demand her return. But they were also in Marcus's debt, and Station Omega-7 was technically sovereign Terran territory. We'll figure something out, he promised. Station Omega-7's medical bay was equipped to handle most alien physiologies, and the station's doctor, Sarah Kim, was one of the few people Marcus trusted completely. She examined Luna with gentle professionalism, while Marcus explained the situation. Physically, she's in good condition aside from some malnutrition, Dr. Kim reported. But I'm reading some concerning stress markers. How long was she in captivity? 3 years, Luna answered quietly. Since the collectors took me from my homeworld. Marcus felt that cold anger building again. 3 years of captivity, treated like a lab animal because her people hadn't been lucky enough to join the galactic community before the slave traders found them. Captain Reynolds, the station commander, was less sympathetic to Marcus's impromptu rescue mission. You've put us in a difficult position, Chen, she said during the debriefing. The Ziltharians are demanding the return of their research specimen, and we can't just ignore Galactic Council law. Since when do we recognize slavery? Marcus shot back. It's not slavery if she's not legally considered a person. That's exactly what slavery is. The argument might have continued indefinitely if Luna hadn't chosen that moment to demonstrate exactly how wrong the Council's assumptions were. The station's computer system began experiencing what the technicians initially thought were random glitches. Files were being reorganized, security protocols were being updated, and the environmental controls had been optimized for better efficiency. It took them 6 hours to realize that Luna was responsible. Somehow, she was interfacing directly with the station's computer systems. Not through any external device, but through some kind of biological capability that the Ziltharians had apparently never bothered to investigate. She's not just sentient, Dr. Kim reported to Captain Reynolds. She's operating on a level that makes our best computer programmers look like children playing with blocks, and she's been doing it to help the station run more efficiently. Captain Reynolds studied the data with growing amazement. Luna had identified and fixed 17 different system inefficiencies, prevented 3 potential equipment failures, and somehow improved their mining operations output by 12%, all while supposedly being examined in the medical bay. Why? Reynolds asked Luna directly. Why help us? Marcus helped me, Luna replied simply. I wanted to help him in return. That evening, Marcus found Luna in the station's observation deck, staring out at the stars through the reinforced transparent aluminum windows. She'd been given quarters of her own, but she seemed to prefer the communal spaces where she could watch the cosmos turn. Pretty view, Marcus said, settling into a nearby chair. His prosthetic leg always ached after long days, and the observation deck's chairs were the most comfortable on the station. I had never seen the galaxy from a safe place before, Luna replied. It is beautiful when you are not afraid. Fear changes everything, Marcus agreed. He'd learned that lesson the hard way, both in combat zones and in the long months of recovery afterward. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the mining drones work their way across the planet's surface far below. Eventually, Luna spoke again. The Ziltharians say I will have to go back with them tomorrow. Over my dead body, Marcus said with more heat than he'd intended. Luna looked at him with surprise. You would fight for me, even though it might cause trouble for your people? Sometimes trouble is worth it. I do not understand humans, Luna said. You risk yourselves for strangers. It is not logical. Marcus thought about that for a moment. Maybe not, But logic isn't everything. Sometimes you have to do what's right instead of what's smart. Is that why you came to rescue us? Because it was right? Partly. Also because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. Luna tilted her head in that curious gesture he was beginning to recognize. You have much sadness in you. I can sense it. Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that. He'd spent years learning to hide his emotional scars, but apparently they were visible to someone who could interface with computer systems through thought alone. We all carry sadness, he said finally. The trick is not letting it stop you from doing good when you get the chance. You did good for me, Luna said. No one has done good for me in a long time. The next morning brought a delegation from the Ziltharian ship, which had been towed to the station's repair dock. Captain HFY arrived with 2 other officials and a stack of legal documents demanding Luna's immediate return. She is valuable research property, HFY insisted during the meeting with Captain Reynolds. Her neural interface capabilities could revolutionize our understanding of biological computing. You mean you want to cut her open and see how she works? Marcus said bluntly. We would conduct our research humanely, of course. Of course, because treating sentient beings like lab equipment is so humane. Captain Reynolds held up a hand before the argument could escalate. I've been in contact with Terran Command about this situation. Given the evidence of Luna's advanced intelligence and her voluntary assistance with our station operations, they're prepared to offer her asylum under the Sentient Being Protection Act. HFY's face darkened. Terra cannot simply ignore Galactic Council law when it becomes inconvenient. We're not ignoring it, Reynolds replied calmly. We're challenging it. Luna's case will be presented to the Council's Sentient Rights Committee. Until they make a ruling, she remains under Terran protection. The legal maneuvering continued for hours, but Marcus had stopped paying attention. He'd seen enough bureaucratic battles to know that the real decisions were often made elsewhere. What mattered was that Luna would be safe, at least for now. That evening, he found her in the station's small hydroponics garden, carefully examining the growing vegetables with the intense focus of someone encountering earth plants for the first time. These are very efficient, she observed as Marcus approached. Your people have bred them well. Thousands of years of practice, Marcus replied. Humans have always been good at making things grow. Will I be safe here? Luna asked suddenly. Marcus considered lying, offering false reassurances that everything would work out perfectly. Instead, he chose honesty. I don't know, he admitted. The legal system is complicated and you're caught in the middle of something bigger than either of us. But I promise you this, as long as I'm here, I won't let them take you back to being someone's research project. Luna studied his face with those dark, intelligent eyes. You mean that? I do. Why? You barely know me. Marcus thought about all the reasons he could give. The military's code about leaving no one behind. His personal hatred of bullies and systems that treated people as disposable. The simple fact that helping Luna was the first thing that had made him feel truly useful since leaving the service. Instead, he settled on the simplest truth. Because you asked for help, and I was in a position to give it. Luna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but determined. If I am to stay here, I want to do more than just hide. I want to help, the way you helped me. What did you have in mind? Your mining operations could be much more efficient with proper coordination. And there are problems with your long-range sensors that I could fix. I could be useful. Marcus smiled. Luna, you've already been more useful than you know. But if you want to do more, I'm sure we can find ways to put your talents to work. As they stood together in the small garden, surrounded by growing things and the vast darkness of space beyond the station's walls, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope, not just for himself, but for the strange, brilliant alien who had somehow wandered into his life and changed everything. He didn't know what the future would hold, or whether the Galactic Council would ultimately recognize Luna's right to freedom. But for the first time since losing his leg and his marriage and his faith in the universe's basic fairness, Marcus Chen believed that maybe, just maybe, his luck was finally starting to change. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the small dramas playing out on the mining station, but Marcus no longer felt small beneath their gaze. He felt like he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. And that was enough. 3 weeks after Luna's arrival at Station Omega-7, Marcus discovered that his luck hadn't just changed. It had taken a sharp turn into the realm of the completely impossible. The realization hit him while he was reviewing the mining operations efficiency reports, numbers that should have been steady, showing improvements that defied every expectation he'd had about their equipment's capabilities. "This can't be right," he muttered, staring at the data displays in the control center. The automated mining drones were extracting 40% more rare minerals than their theoretical maximum output. Either the manufacturer's specifications were wildly conservative, or something fundamental had changed about how the operation worked. Luna's voice came from behind him, quiet but amused. "The numbers are correct, Marcus. I have been optimizing the drone coordination protocols." He turned to find her perched on a console chair, her pale wings folded neatly against her back as she studied multiple holographic displays simultaneously. Over the past few weeks, she'd made herself indispensable to the station's operations, but Marcus was only now beginning to understand the full scope of her capabilities. "How optimized are we talking about here?" he asked. The drones were operating as independent units with minimal coordination. I created a networked intelligence that allows them to work as a unified system. Each drone now knows what every other drone is doing and can adjust its actions accordingly. Marcus stared at the efficiency numbers again. "Luna, this is going to get attention. The kind of attention that makes corporate executives very interested and very greedy. Is that bad?" "Depends on who's doing the noticing." His concern proved prophetic. 2 days later, Captain Reynolds called him into her office to inform him that representatives from Kepler Mining Consortium, the corporation that held the extraction rights for the system, would be arriving within the week to investigate the sudden improvement in their operations output. "They're sending a full corporate audit team," Reynolds explained, "complete with legal specialists and efficiency experts. They want to know how a backwater mining station suddenly became their most profitable operation in 3 sectors. Marcus felt the familiar weight of impending trouble settling on his shoulders. "What's our story?" "The truth, as far as we can tell it. An alien refugee with unique technical abilities has been helping optimize our operations as a form of payment for sanctuary. And if they decide they want those unique technical abilities for themselves?" Captain Reynolds was quiet for a long moment. "Then we have a problem." The corporate delegation arrived aboard a sleek executive transport that made Station Omega-7's utilitarian design look like a rust bucket by comparison. Marcus watched through the docking bay's observation windows as 6 humans in expensive suits disembarked, followed by 2 alien advisors he didn't recognize. Leading the group was Elizabeth Hawthorne, Kepler Mining's vice president of operations, and a woman whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was legendary throughout the corporate mining sector. Marcus had never met her personally, but he'd heard enough stories to know that she didn't visit remote stations unless something very important was at stake. The formal introductions took place in the station's main conference room. Hawthorne was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 40s, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. She was polite but businesslike as she shook hands with the senior staff. "I'll be direct," she said once everyone was seated. "Our projections for this operation were based on 5 years of extraction data. In the past month, you've exceeded those projections by margins that should be impossible with your current equipment. We need to understand how and why." Captain Reynolds handled the initial explanation with diplomatic skill, describing Luna's arrival and her subsequent assistance with station operations. Marcus noticed that she carefully avoided mentioning the circumstances of Luna's rescue or her legal status as a refugee. "And where is this Luna now?" Hawthorne asked. "She's working in our main computer center," Reynolds replied. "I can arrange an introduction if you'd like." "I would like that very much." Marcus felt his stomach tighten as they made their way through the station's corridors toward the computer center. Luna had been spending most of her time there, interfacing with the station's systems in ways that the technical staff still didn't fully understand. He'd tried to prepare her for this meeting, but he wasn't sure how she'd react to corporate scrutiny. They found Luna suspended in the center of the computer core, her eyes closed and her breathing steady as dozens of holographic data streams flowed around her like luminous rivers. She looked ethereal, almost godlike, as she manipulated information through pure thought. "Remarkable," breathed Dr. Sarah Kim, one of Hawthorne's technical advisors. "She's interfacing directly with the quantum processors. I've never seen anything like it." Luna's eyes opened at the sound of voices, and the data streams gradually faded as she gently disengaged from the system. She settled gracefully on the floor and turned to face the delegation with obvious curiosity. "You must be the corporate representatives Marcus warned me about," she said with a slight smile. "I am Luna." Hawthorne stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Luna, I'm Elizabeth Hawthorne from Kepler Mining Consortium. We're very interested in understanding how you've managed to improve our mining operation so dramatically." "It was not difficult," Luna replied. "Your systems were simply not coordinated properly. I created better communication pathways between the different components." "And you did this through direct neural interface with our computers?" "Yes. It is a natural ability for my people." Marcus watched Hawthorne's face carefully. He could see the exact moment when she realized what Luna represented, not just as a refugee seeking sanctuary, but as a potentially invaluable corporate asset. The slight narrowing of her eyes, the subtle shift in her posture, all the tells of someone recalculating the value of everything in the room. "Luna," Hawthorne said carefully, "would you be interested in a more formal arrangement with our company? We have research facilities that could benefit greatly from your unique abilities." "What kind of arrangement?" Luna asked. "Employment, of course, with excellent compensation and access to the most advanced computer systems in the galaxy. You could do incredible things with the right resources." Marcus stepped forward before Luna could respond. "She's not looking for employment. She's seeking asylum." Hawthorne's gaze shifted to Marcus, and he saw the calculation there. A disabled veteran running support operations on a remote mining station wasn't exactly a major obstacle to corporate interests. "Mr. Chen, isn't it? I understand you were instrumental in bringing Luna to the station." "I helped rescue her from a crashed ship," Marcus said carefully. "Yes, the Ziltharian science vessel. We've reviewed the incident reports. Quite heroic of you." Her tone made it clear that she found heroism quaint but irrelevant to business interests. The conversation continued for another hour, with Hawthorne's team asking increasingly detailed questions about Luna's capabilities and the technical improvements she'd made to the mining operation. Luna answered honestly, apparently not recognizing the dangerous ground she was walking on. That evening, Marcus found Luna in her usual spot on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She seemed troubled, her normally serene expression clouded with uncertainty. "The corporate woman wants to take me away," she said without preamble. "I figured she might." "What did you tell her?" "That I would consider her offer." Was that wrong? Marcus sat down beside her, his prosthetic leg aching from a long day of tension. Not wrong. Exactly. But you should know that corporations like Kepler don't really make offers. They make deals that benefit them, usually at the expense of everyone else involved. She said I could do incredible things with their resources. I'm sure you could. The question is whether those incredible things would be what you want to do, or what they want you to do. Luna was quiet for a moment, processing this distinction. You think they would try to control me? I think they'd try to own you. There's a difference between employment and slavery, but it's smaller than most people like to admit. What do you think I should do? Marcus considered his words carefully. He'd grown fond of Luna over the past few weeks, enjoyed watching her discover the small wonders of station life and marveling at her unique perspective on human nature. The thought of losing her to corporate interests left him feeling hollow. I think you should do what feels right to you, he said finally. But remember that once you sign a contract with people like Hawthorne, it's very hard to change your mind later. The next morning brought news that complicated an already difficult situation. Captain Reynolds called Marcus to her office to inform him that the Galactic Council's Sentient Rights Committee had agreed to review Luna's case, but the proceedings wouldn't begin for at least 6 months. That's actually good news, Reynolds explained. It means they're taking her petition seriously, but it also means she'll be in legal limbo until they reach a decision. And Hawthorne? She's requesting an extension of her visit, claims she needs more time to fully evaluate the mining operation's improvements. Marcus understood the implication immediately. Hawthorne wasn't interested in the mining operation anymore. She was interested in Luna, and she was prepared to wait as long as necessary to get what she wanted. The pressure began subtly. Hawthorne's team started conducting efficiency audits of every system Luna had modified, ostensibly to understand her improvements, but actually to catalog her capabilities for corporate evaluation. They asked increasingly invasive questions about her background, her people, and her long-term plans. Luna bore the scrutiny with patience, but Marcus could see the stress wearing on her. She spent longer hours in the computer core, her movements becoming more mechanical and less graceful. Her usual curiosity about station life faded into a distant politeness that reminded him uncomfortably of her behavior when she'd first been rescued. The breaking point came during a formal dinner that Captain Reynolds had organized as a diplomatic gesture. Hawthorne spent the evening subtly pressuring Luna to accept a consulting position with Kepler Mining, making increasingly generous offers while carefully avoiding any mention of contractual obligations or corporate oversight. Think of the possibilities, Hawthorne was saying over dessert. With our resources, you could optimize mining operations across dozens of systems. You could revolutionize the entire industry. And if I chose not to work on mining operations? Luna asked quietly. Well, naturally, your contract would specify certain responsibilities, but within those parameters, you'd have considerable freedom. Marcus watched Luna's face as the reality of the situation became clear to her. She would be trading one form of captivity for another, exchanging the Ziltharian's research cage for a corporate one. The only difference would be the quality of the accommodations. That night, Marcus found Luna in the hydroponics garden again, sitting among the growing plants with tears streaming down her pale cheeks. It was the first time he'd seen her cry, and the sight hit him harder than he'd expected. I do not want to go with them, she said without looking up. Marcus sat down beside her, careful not to crowd her space. Then don't. They will not accept refusal. The corporate woman speaks of choices, but she offers none. There are always choices. They're just not always good ones. Luna looked at him with those dark, intelligent eyes. What would you do? Marcus thought about his own experiences with systems that claimed to offer choices while actually demanding compliance. The military, the VA hospital, the employment agencies that treated disabled veterans like damaged goods that needed special handling. I'd run, he said finally, far and fast before they could stop me. Where would I go? I have no ship, no resources, no knowledge of the galaxy beyond this station. You'd have me. The words were out before Marcus realized he'd decided to say them. Luna stared at him in surprise, and he felt a moment of panic at his own impulsiveness. Then he thought about what Hawthorne represented. What would happen to Luna if she fell into corporate hands? And the panic faded into grim determination. You would help me escape? Luna asked. I'd do more than that. I'd come with you. Marcus, you have a life here, a position, responsibilities. I have a job, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. And lately, I've been thinking that maybe it's time for a change of scenery. They spent the next hour planning in whispers among the growing vegetables. Marcus knew the station's systems well enough to identify a window of opportunity during the next shift change. The maintenance shuttle was fast enough to reach the edge of the system before anyone realized they were gone, and he still had contacts in the merchant marine who might be willing to provide passage to somewhere beyond Kepler Mining's reach. The plan was risky and probably illegal under several different sets of laws, but Marcus had stopped caring about legal niceties the moment Hawthorne started talking about Luna like a piece of valuable equipment. Some things were more important than following rules, especially when the rules were written by people who treated sentient beings as property. 2 days later, during the quiet hours of the night shift, Marcus and Luna made their move. She had spent the afternoon creating a cascade of minor system malfunctions that would keep the technical staff busy for hours, ensuring that no one would notice the maintenance shuttle's departure until they were long gone. Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as they slipped through the station's corridors toward the docking bay. It was the same feeling he'd experienced during night operations in Afghanistan. The mixture of fear and excitement that came with high-stakes action. His prosthetic leg seemed to move more smoothly, as if his body remembered how to be a soldier even if his mind had tried to forget. Luna moved beside him with surprising stealth for someone with wings, her pale scales almost luminous in the dim emergency lighting. She carried a small bag containing her few possessions and a data crystal with copies of all her improvements to the station's systems. A gift for Captain Reynolds, she'd explained, to help explain their sudden departure. The maintenance shuttle was exactly where Marcus had left it, fueled and ready for what the logs would show as a routine inspection of the outer sensor array. He ran through the pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency, while Luna strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, as the engines hummed to life. Luna looked back at the station one last time, then nodded with quiet determination. "I am ready." The shuttle slipped away from Station Omega-7 like a whisper in the darkness, carrying 2 refugees toward an uncertain future among the stars. Behind them, the corporate delegation continued their negotiations, unaware that their prize had just slipped through their fingers. Marcus felt a wild surge of satisfaction as the station shrank to a point of light behind them. For the first time in years, he was taking action instead of just enduring whatever the universe threw at him. It felt dangerous and reckless and absolutely right. "Where are we going?" Luna asked as they cleared the station's sensor range. "Somewhere they can't follow," Marcus replied. "Somewhere you can be free." The stars stretched out ahead of them, vast and full of possibility. Marcus had no idea what they would find out there, but he was surprised to discover that the uncertainty didn't frighten him. Instead, it filled him with something he'd thought he'd lost forever: the thrill of adventure, the promise of new horizons, and the simple joy of making his own choices about what came next. Behind them, Station Omega-7 continued its quiet orbit around Kepler 442b, its mining drones still operating at peak efficiency thanks to Luna's modifications. But the Dragon and her unlikely protector were gone, racing toward the edge of known space and whatever lay beyond. Marcus had always believed that luck was something other people had. As he watched the stars wheel past the shuttle's view screen, he began to think that maybe he'd been wrong about that too. Maybe luck wasn't something that happened to you. Maybe it was something you made for yourself, one difficult choice at a time. 6 months after escaping from Station Omega-7, Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the Lucky Dragon, watching a hegemony patrol fleet struggle with what their sensors insisted was impossible. The 3 heavy cruisers and their escort fighters were chasing sensor ghosts through an asteroid field, their targeting computers convinced they were pursuing a massive battleship that their eyes insisted didn't exist. "They're getting frustrated," Luna observed from her position at the ship's unique hybrid control system. Her pale scales shimmered with faint bioluminescence as she interfaced with the Dragon's quantum computers, weaving electronic illusions that would have made Earth's greatest hackers weep with envy. Marcus smiled grimly as he watched the patrol ships fire their weapons at empty space. Good. Frustrated enemies make mistakes. The Lucky Dragon was unlike any ship in the galaxy, a testament to what could be accomplished when human engineering met alien brilliance and desperation provided unlimited motivation. Built in the hidden shipyards of New Tortuga from salvaged parts and revolutionary designs, she was part cargo hauler, part research vessel, and part something entirely new. Her hull was a patchwork of materials from a dozen different species, held together by Luna's neural interface technology and Marcus's stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. She wasn't the fastest ship in space or the most heavily armed, but she could become invisible to sensors, phase through solid matter for brief periods, and coordinate with any computer system in the galaxy through Luna's unique abilities. More importantly, she was theirs, bought with the bounties they'd collected from hunting the galaxy's most dangerous criminals, and purchased with credits earned from impossible rescue missions that no one else would attempt. The corporate lawyers and government bureaucrats who'd tried to claim ownership of Luna had learned the hard way that some things couldn't be bought, sold, or regulated. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Those first few months after leaving Omega-7 had been brutal, a constant struggle to stay ahead of the various parties hunting them while figuring out how to survive in a galaxy that treated refugees as disposable commodities. They'd started small, taking odd jobs on the frontier worlds where questions weren't asked and payment came in untraceable credits. Luna's ability to interface with any computer system made her invaluable for data recovery and system repair work, while Marcus's military experience proved useful for the kind of security consulting that kept them fed and hidden. The breakthrough had come during a job on Proxima Station, a notorious haven for smugglers and pirates on the edge of civilized space. They'd been hired to recover stolen research data from a crashed ship, a routine job that turned deadly when they discovered the wreck wasn't empty. The Skorak pirates who'd been using the crash site as a base had captured 17 refugees from various species, planning to sell them to the highest bidder in the sector's thriving slave markets. The sight of terrified civilians in chains had triggered something primal in Marcus, memories of helpless villagers caught between military forces and his own bitter experience with systems that treated people as expendable resources. Luna had felt his rage through their growing psychological connection and responded by taking control of every electronic system on the pirates' ship simultaneously. Weapons, life support, artificial gravity, and navigation. Everything became an extension of her will, turning the pirates' own vessel into a weapon against them. The rescue had been spectacular and messy, leaving 7 pirates dead and the rest fleeing into the void in their escape pods. More importantly, it had given Marcus and Luna their first taste of what they could accomplish when they stopped trying to hide from the galaxy's problems and started confronting them head-on. Word of the incident had spread through the underground networks that connected the frontier's criminal and revolutionary elements. Within weeks, they were receiving job offers from desperate people who needed problems solved by individuals who didn't respect conventional limitations. They'd liberated a corporate research facility that was conducting illegal experiments on sentient beings. They'd exposed a Galactic Council member who was selling military secrets to the hegemony. They'd rescued the kidnapped daughter of a prominent senator and left her captors stranded on an asteroid with enough supplies to survive, but not enough to enjoy the experience. Each successful mission had added to their reputation and their resources. Luna's abilities continued to evolve, her neural interface technology becoming more sophisticated as she learned to work with human-designed systems. Marcus discovered talents he'd never known he possessed, his military training combining with Luna's technical support to make him a strategic genius, capable of anticipating enemy moves and exploiting weaknesses that others missed. The Lucky Dragon had been their greatest achievement, a ship designed from the ground up to take advantage of Luna's unique capabilities. The neural interface cores were integrated into every system, allowing her to control the vessel's functions with the same ease that humans controlled their own bodies. The ship could adapt to any situation, becoming whatever they needed it to be. Now they were putting her to the ultimate test, taking on the hegemony itself in a mission that most military analysts would have declared suicidal. The hegemony was a coalition of aggressive species that had been expanding into council space for decades, conquering systems and enslaving populations with a brutality that made even the galaxy's criminal elements uncomfortable. The current crisis had started when the hegemony captured Sanctuary, a neutral world that served as a refuge for political dissidents and escaped slaves from across the galaxy. The attack had been swift and overwhelming, leaving the planet's modest defenses in ruins and its population facing the choice between submission and death. The Galactic Council's response had been predictably bureaucratic: emergency sessions, formal protests, and strongly worded condemnations that the hegemony ignored completely. Meanwhile, 50,000 refugees were trapped on Sanctuary, waiting for rescue that official channels would never provide. Marcus and Luna had received the contract through their usual channels, a desperate message from one of Sanctuary's underground leaders offering everything they had for a single evacuation run. The payment was trivial compared to their recent jobs, but the mission itself was exactly the kind of impossible challenge that had come to define their partnership. "The patrol fleet is moving away from the evacuation zone," Luna reported, her voice carrying the subtle harmonics that indicated she was interfacing with multiple systems simultaneously. "The transport ship should be able to reach minimum safe distance within the hour." Marcus nodded. Watching the tactical display show the fruits of their elaborate deception. While the hegemony ships chased their sensor ghosts through the asteroid field, a fleet of captured transport vessels was racing away from Sanctuary with nearly 8,000 refugees aboard. It was the third evacuation run they'd coordinated, each one more dangerous than the last, as the hegemony forces grew wise to their tactics. The plan had taken months to organize, requiring coordination with resistance cells across a dozen worlds and the acquisition of resources that officially didn't exist. Marcus had drawn on every contact he'd made during their outlaw career, calling in favors and making promises that he hoped he'd live long enough to keep. The key had been Luna's breakthrough in quantum communication technology, a development that allowed instantaneous coordination across interstellar distances. Using techniques derived from her people's neural interface abilities, she'd created a communication network that the hegemony couldn't detect or intercept, linking the various resistance groups into a unified command structure. The evacuations themselves were masterpieces of misdirection and timing. While the hegemony forces focused on what they thought were major military movements, small groups of refugees were spirited away to hidden transfer points where faster ships could carry them to safety beyond the war zone. Marcus had learned to think in terms of movements and counter-movements, treating the entire operation like a chess game played across multiple star systems. His military training provided the strategic framework, but Luna's technological capabilities gave him pieces that could move in ways no conventional commander could anticipate. "Incoming transmission from the surface," Luna announced. "Priority channel from Commander Yates." Commander Sarah Yates was the military leader of Sanctuary's resistance forces, a former Council Navy officer who'd refused orders to abandon the refugee world when the politicians decided it was too expensive to defend. Marcus had never met her in person, but they'd worked together closely during the planning phases of the evacuation. "Put her through," Marcus said. Yates's voice crackled with static from the interference generated by the ongoing bombardment of Sanctuary's surface. "Lucky Dragon, this is Sanctuary Command. We've got a problem." "How big a problem?" "The hegemony just deployed a new weapon. Some kind of orbital bombardment system that can punch through our underground shelters. They're systematically destroying every hiding place on the planet." Marcus felt ice settle in his stomach. The evacuation plan had assumed that Sanctuary's underground facilities could protect the remaining refugees until the final transport runs were completed. If the hegemony could reach them anywhere on the planet, then 40,000 people were about to become casualties of a war that the rest of the galaxy was content to ignore. "How long until they crack all the shelters?" he asked. 18 hours, maybe less. The weapon's getting more accurate with each shot." Marcus looked at Luna, seeing his own grim determination reflected in her dark eyes. They'd known from the beginning that this mission might require sacrifices, but neither of them had been prepared to write off 40,000 lives because the timeline had changed. "We need a new plan," he said. "What did you have in mind?" Marcus studied the tactical display, watching the hegemony ships maintain their bombardment pattern around Sanctuary. The fleet was massive, probably the largest concentration of enemy forces in this sector. A frontal assault would be suicide, but sometimes the direct approach was the last thing an enemy expected. "We're going to give them something bigger to worry about than hunting refugees," he said finally. "Such as?" "The complete destruction of their command structure." Luna's bioluminescence intensified as she processed the implications of that statement. "Marcus, the flagship alone has more firepower than most planetary defense systems. We cannot fight them directly. We're not going to fight them. We're going to do what we always do. We're going to cheat." The plan that Marcus outlined over the next hour was audacious, even by their standards. Instead of trying to hide from the hegemony fleet, they would approach openly, using forged credentials to get close enough for Luna to infiltrate the flagship's computer systems. Once she had control of their communications and weapons, they could turn the entire fleet against itself. "The credentials won't survive close inspection," Luna warned as she fabricated the necessary documents in real time. "We will have perhaps 10 minutes before they realize we are not who we claim to be." 10 minutes should be enough," Marcus replied with more confidence than he felt. The approach to the hegemony flagship was the longest 10 minutes of Marcus's life. The Lucky Dragon flew through the enemy formation like she belonged there, her hull displaying the transponder codes of a hegemony intelligence vessel returning from a deep cover mission. Luna had crafted their cover identity with typical thoroughness, complete with mission records and personnel files that would pass any standard security check. The flagship Eternal Victory was a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons and sensors, its hull scarred by dozens of previous battles. Marcus counted at least 40 weapon emplacements as they approached the docking bay, any one of which could vaporize their ship if the deception failed. "Docking clearance granted," came the response from the flagship's traffic control. "Proceed to Bay 7 for security inspection." "Acknowledged," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the sweat on his palms. The docking bay was a vast space filled with hegemony fighters and transport craft. Marcus guided the Lucky Dragon to their assigned berth while Luna worked frantically to identify the flagship's computer access points. They would have only moments once they docked, before security teams arrived to verify their credentials. The moment their ship's hull touched the docking clamps, Luna struck. Her consciousness expanded through the flagship's computer networks like wildfire, seizing control of systems faster than the hegemony's security protocols could respond. Within seconds, she had access to communications, navigation, and weapons control for the entire fleet. "I have them," she announced, her voice carrying strange harmonics as her consciousness distributed itself across dozens of enemy ships simultaneously. "What are your orders?" Marcus smiled grimly as he activated the Dragon's external speakers. "Attention, Hegemony Fleet. This is Commander Marcus Chen of the vessel Lucky Dragon. You are hereby ordered to cease bombardment operations and withdraw from this system immediately." The response was instantaneous and predictable. "Unknown vessel, you are in violation of hegemony space. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." "I don't think so," Marcus replied. Then to Luna, "Show them what we can do." The demonstration was brief but unmistakable. Every weapon on every ship in the hegemony fleet suddenly swiveled to target their own flagship. Their targeting computers convinced that the Eternal Victory was an enemy vessel that needed to be destroyed. The effect lasted only seconds before Luna released control, but the message was clear. "Your fleet is now under my control," Marcus announced into the sudden silence. "Every ship, every weapon, every life support system, all of it. If you want to keep breathing, you'll listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in the history of galactic warfare. Marcus found himself dictating terms to a hegemony admiral while sitting in the enemy's own docking bay, protected by nothing more than Luna's ability to turn their weapons against them at a moment's notice. The final agreement was elegantly simple. The hegemony fleet would withdraw from the sanctuary system and provide transport for the remaining refugees to neutral space. In exchange, Marcus and Luna would not upload the complete records of hegemony war crimes that Luna had discovered in their computer systems to every major news network in the galaxy. "You realize this is only a temporary setback," Admiral Krex warned during the final negotiations. "The hegemony does not forget insults, and we will have our revenge." "You're welcome to try," Marcus replied calmly. "But remember, we found you once. We can find you again." The evacuation of Sanctuary became the stuff of legend in the underground networks that connected the galaxy's oppressed populations. 50,000 refugees rescued by 2 people in a single ship, an entire hegemony fleet defeated without firing a shot, and a new model for resistance against impossible odds. Within months, Marcus and Luna were receiving requests from resistance movements across the galaxy. Oppressed colonies wanted them to break corporate strangleholds. Enslaved populations begged for liberation from their captors. Politicians sought their help in exposing corruption that conventional law enforcement couldn't touch. They accepted the missions that felt right, the ones where ordinary beings needed help against systems too powerful for conventional resistance. Each success added to their growing legend, the story of the human veteran and the alien dragon who refused to accept that some problems were too big to solve. The Galactic Council eventually acknowledged Luna's legal status as a free being, partly due to political pressure and partly because ignoring her had become impossible. By that point, she had grown far beyond the frightened refugee Marcus had rescued from a crashed ship. She had become something new, a bridge between organic intelligence and artificial consciousness that represented possibilities no one had imagined. Marcus found himself changing too, his sense of purpose restored by work that mattered to people who had nowhere else to turn. The nightmares that had plagued him since Afghanistan gradually faded, replaced by dreams of the next mission, the next impossible problem that needed solving. Years later, historians would debate the exact moment when Marcus Chen and Luna stopped being criminals on the run and became legendary heroes. Marcus himself never worried about such distinctions. He knew that legends were just stories people told about ordinary individuals who happened to be in the right place at the right time with the courage to act. He also knew that his luck had indeed changed, but not in the way he'd once hoped. Instead of receiving good fortune from the universe, he had learned to create it through action, determination, and the friendship of a remarkable alien who had shown him that some bonds transcended species and circumstances. The Lucky Dragon continued to move through the galaxy's dark spaces, carrying her unlikely crew toward whatever crisis needed their attention next. Behind them, they left a trail of impossible victories and rescued lives, proof that sometimes the longest odds could be overcome by refusing to accept defeat. Marcus Chen had always believed that luck was something other people had. He'd been wrong about that, but in the best possible way. Luck wasn't something that happened to you, it was something you made, one difficult choice at a time, in partnership with someone who believed the universe could be better than it was, and in the end, that belief had been enough to change everything.